I got hired at a call center 3 weeks ago. The job posting made it sound fine. Customer service, phone support, normal stuff. I needed the money and they were hiring immediately, so I didn't ask too many questions during the interview. My first day was a Tuesday. They put me in a training room on the 3rd floor with 11 other new hires. The room had no windows. Fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly. Beige walls. 12 desks arranged in rows facing a projector screen. Our trainer was a woman named Diane. She wore the same gray cardigan every single day. She smiled too much. Not in a friendly way. In a way that made her face look like it was stuck. The training was supposed to last 2 weeks. Diane told us the company specialized in debt collection. We'd be calling people who owed money. She said it would be challenging but rewarding. She said we'd learn scripts and techniques. She said most people quit within the first month, but the ones who stayed made good money. I noticed something strange on day 3. One of the other trainees, a guy named Marcus, raised his hand during a practice call session. He asked Diane if we could take a break. She looked at him for a long time without blinking. Then she said no. Marcus stood up anyway. He said he needed to use the bathroom. Diane walked over to his desk and stood beside him. She didn't touch him. She just stood there with that smile. Marcus sat back down. Nobody asked for a break after that. On day 5, I realized something was wrong with the clock on the wall. It was an old analog clock with a white face and black numbers. I'd been watching it because the training was boring. I watched the second hand tick forward. Then I watched it tick backward. Just once. I blinked and stared at it harder. It ticked forward normally for about 30 seconds. Then it ticked backward again. 2 ticks this time. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed. Nobody was looking at the clock. Everyone was staring at their desks or at Diane. I raised my hand. Diane stopped mid-sentence and turned to me. She was explaining how to handle aggressive callers. Her smile didn't move. I asked if the clock was broken. She said the clock worked perfectly. I said it was going backward. She said I should focus on the training material. I didn't argue. That night I went home and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the clock. I kept thinking about Marcus. I kept thinking about how nobody ever left the room during training sessions. Not once. Not even Diane. On day 7, a woman named Kelly stopped coming to training. Her desk was empty when I arrived. I asked the person next to me what happened to Kelly. She said she didn't know anyone named Kelly. I said Kelly sat right there yesterday. She looked at me like I was insane. I counted the desks. There were still 12. But now there were only 10 people, including me. I asked Diane where Kelly went. Diane said there was no Kelly in our training group. I said I remembered her. She had red hair. She wore a blue jacket. She sat in the 2nd row. Diane said I was confused. She said sometimes new hires experience stress and memory issues during training. She said it was normal. That same day, Diane started playing recordings during our practice sessions. She said they were examples of successful collection calls. She said we should listen carefully and take notes. The recordings were strange. The voices sounded flat, robotic. The people on the other end of the line sounded terrified. Not annoyed or angry, terrified. In one recording, a man begged the caller to stop. He said he'd pay anything. He said, please just stop calling. The caller's voice didn't change tone. It just repeated the same script. In another recording, a woman was crying. She said she didn't owe any money. She said she'd never heard of the company. The caller told her the debt was real and she needed to pay immediately. The woman screamed. Then the recording cut off. Diane stopped the playback and asked if we had questions. Nobody said anything. I wanted to ask why the recording sounded like that. I wanted to ask why the people sounded so afraid, but I didn't. Because I realized something. I couldn't remember the last time I'd left the training room. I thought back to the previous days. I remembered arriving in the morning. I remembered sitting at my desk. I remembered Diane talking. I remembered the fluorescent lights and the buzzing and the clock ticking backward. But I couldn't remember leaving. I couldn't remember lunch breaks. I couldn't remember going to the bathroom. I checked my phone under the desk. The battery was dead even though I'd charged it overnight. The screen wouldn't turn on. I looked at the clock again. It was 9:47 a.m. I was certain it had been 9:47 a.m. for the last 2 hours. On day 9, I tried to leave. Diane was in the middle of explaining payment plan procedures when I stood up. I didn't say anything. I just walked toward the door. Everyone stopped and looked at me. Diane stopped talking mid-sentence. I reached for the door handle. It was cold. So cold, it burned my palm. I pulled anyway. The door didn't open. I pulled harder. Diane said my name. I turned around. She was standing right behind me. I hadn't heard her move. She said training wasn't finished yet. I said I needed to leave. She said nobody leaves until training is complete. I asked when training would be complete. She smiled wider. She said it depended on how quickly we learned. I went back to my desk. That night, I didn't go home. I think I didn't go home. I remember sitting at my desk. I remember Diane talking. I remember the lights flickering. I remember the clock ticking backwards so many times. It read 4:23 p.m. when I was certain it should have been past midnight. Then I was at my desk again and it was morning. Or maybe it wasn't morning. Maybe it was still the same day. On day 11, there were only 6 of us left. I didn't know when the others disappeared. I didn't remember them leaving. They were just gone. Diane didn't mention it. She kept training us like nothing changed. She started making us do live practice calls. She gave us headsets and a list of phone numbers. She said we should use everything we'd learned. I put on the headset. I dialed the first number. A man answered. I started reading the script Diane had given us. I told him he owed money. I told him he needed to pay immediately or there would be consequences. He started crying. He said he'd already paid. He said he'd been getting calls for weeks. He said, "Please stop." I kept reading the script. Because Diane was standing right behind me, because I couldn't stop, the man hung up. Diane said, "I did well." She told me to call the next number. I looked at the list. There were hundreds of numbers, thousands maybe. I looked at the clock. It read 9:47 a.m. On day 13, I understood. The training wasn't about learning to do the job. The training was the job. We weren't leaving because we were the ones making the calls now. We were the recordings. We were the voices on the other end of the line that sounded flat and robotic and wrong. I don't know how long I've been here. The clock still reads 9:47 a.m. Diane still smiles. There are 3 of us left now, and I can't remember what my voice used to sound like. I took a night security job at a pharmaceutical warehouse because it paid $17 an hour and I didn't have to talk to anyone. The job was simple. Walk the building every 2 hours. Check the doors. Make sure nobody broke in. Sit in the security office the rest of the time and watch the cameras. The warehouse was massive. 3 floors. Rows and rows of metal shelving units stacked with boxes. Most of it was empty though. The company had downsized a year ago and only used the top floor now. The basement and ground floor were abandoned. My supervisor's name was Carl. He was in his 60s. Thick glasses, coffee-stained shirt. He trained me on my first night. He showed me the security office on the ground floor. A small room with 6 monitor screens showing camera feeds from different parts of the building. A desk. A chair. A mini fridge. Carl told me the important stuff. Don't prop doors open. Don't let anyone in without proper ID. Don't go to the basement unless absolutely necessary. I asked why. He said the lights were bad down there. Half of them didn't work. He said it was easy to trip and hurt yourself. He gave me a flashlight and a ring of keys. He showed me the route for my walking rounds. 1st floor. 2nd floor. 3rd floor. Check the exits. Check the loading docks. Check the storage rooms. Then back to the office. He said the basement wasn't part of the route. I asked if anyone ever went down there. He said no. He said the basement had been sealed off for safety reasons, but corporate never bothered removing it from the building maps. He left at midnight and I started my first solo shift. The first few hours were boring. I sat in the office and watched the monitors. Nothing moved, except for the occasional flicker of a light in the hallway. I scrolled through my phone. I ate a sandwich. At 2 a.m., I did my first walking round. The warehouse was dead silent. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floors. The motion sensor lights clicked on as I walked through each section. Everything looked fine. I checked the ground floor exits. Locked. I went to the 2nd floor. Checked the storage rooms. Empty. I climbed to the 3rd floor. Checked the offices. Dark. I went back to the security office. On the monitors, I noticed something. One of the cameras showed a hallway I didn't recognize. It was darker than the others. The walls were bare concrete. There were no lights on. I checked the camera labels. It was labeled B1, Basement Level 1. I thought that was strange, because Carl said the basement wasn't part of the security system anymore. I switched to the other cameras. Everything looked normal. I switched back to B1. The hallway was still empty, but now there was something in the frame. A door. It was halfway down the hall. Metal. Industrial. It had a small window at eye level. I leaned closer to the monitor. The door was open, just slightly. I could see a sliver of darkness beyond it. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the door had been open the whole time and I just didn't notice. But I kept staring at the monitor because I had this feeling that something was wrong. At 4 a.m., I heard a noise. It came from below me. A low metallic scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. I froze. I checked the monitors. Nothing on the ground floor. Nothing on the 2nd or 3rd floors. I switched to B1. The door was open wider now. I hadn't seen it move, but it was definitely open wider than before. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Carl said, don't go to the basement unless absolutely necessary. But what if someone broke in down there? What if that's what the noise was? I grabbed the flashlight and the keys. I left the office and walked to the stairwell at the far end of the building. There was a door marked Basement Access. Authorized personnel only. I unlocked it. The stairwell was dark. The lights didn't turn on when I opened the door. I clicked on the flashlight and started down. The air got colder the further I descended. I could see my breath. At the bottom, there was another door. It was heavy, steel. It had a small window with wire mesh glass. I looked through the window, the hallway from the camera. Bare concrete walls, exposed pipes running along the ceiling, emergency lights casting a dim red glow, and the metal door halfway down the hall. It was wide open now. I unlocked the basement door and stepped into the hallway. My footsteps sounded too loud. I walked slowly toward the open door. I tried to tell myself this was fine. Maybe a maintenance worker had been down here earlier and forgot to close it. But the scraping sound came again, closer this time. It was coming from inside the room beyond the open door. I stopped walking. I aimed the flashlight at the doorway. The room inside was large. I could see metal shelving units, boxes, filing cabinets, and something else. Something moving. I took a step back. The scraping stopped. Then I heard breathing. Not my breathing. Someone else's. Heavy. Wet. Labored. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I just ran down the hallway to the stairwell door. I fumbled with the handle and yanked it open. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time. I slammed the basement access door shut behind me and locked it. I went back to the security office. I checked the monitors. Camera B1 showed the hallway. The metal door was closed now. I stared at the screen for the rest of my shift. I didn't do another walking round. I didn't move from the chair. At 6 a.m., Carl came back. He asked how the night went. I told him about the noise. I told him about the door. I told him I went to the basement. His face changed. He said I shouldn't have done that. I asked why. He said the basement was sealed for a reason. I asked what reason. He didn't answer. He said I should go home and get some rest. I worked 4 more shifts that week. Every night, I watched camera B1. Every night, the door opened a little more. On my 5th shift, I heard the scraping sound again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the basement. It was coming from the hallway outside the security office. I checked the ground floor cameras. Nothing. The scraping got louder. I looked at the office door. The handle was turning. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The door opened. Nobody was there, but I could hear the breathing again. Heavy, wet, labored, right outside the doorway. I quit the next morning. I called Carl and told him I wasn't coming back. He said he understood. He said most people don't last more than a week. I asked him what was in the basement. He said it didn't matter anymore. He said it wasn't in the basement. I started working at a marketing firm 6 months ago. The office was downtown, 15th floor, glass walls, expensive furniture. Everyone wore business casual and smiled constantly. My job was digital marketing coordinator. I answered emails. I managed social media accounts for clients. I sat in meetings. Normal corporate stuff. The company had 90 employees. My direct supervisor was a woman named Vanessa. She was nice, competent. She gave clear instructions and never micromanaged. The CEO's name was Richard Hollis. I'd only seen him twice, once during my interview and once during the quarterly company meeting. He was in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit. He talked about growth and innovation and company culture. Everyone clapped when he finished speaking. Everything seemed fine for the first 4 months. I did my work. I met my deadlines. I got along with my coworkers. Then I got the email about my performance review. It came from HR, standard corporate template. It said my 6-month review was scheduled for Friday at 3 p.m. in conference room C. It said Richard Hollis would be conducting the review personally. I thought that was strange. Usually, Vanessa did performance reviews. The CEO didn't meet with individual employees unless something was seriously wrong. I asked Vanessa about it. She said it was normal. She said Richard liked to personally review all new hires at the 6-month mark. She said I had nothing to worry about, but her voice sounded weird when she said it. Friday came. At 2:55 p.m., I walked to conference room C. It was at the end of the hall on the east side of the building. The door was closed. There was a small window in the door, but the blinds were drawn. I knocked. Richard's voice said, "Come in." I opened the door. The conference room was small, just a table and 4 chairs. No windows. The lights were dimmed. Richard sat at the head of the table. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat down. He smiled. He said congratulations on making it to 6 months. I said thank you. He opened a folder in front of him. He said he'd reviewed my work. He said I was doing well. He said the company valued employees like me. I said I appreciated that. Then he slid a piece of paper across the table. He said it was a performance evaluation form. He said I needed to sign it. I picked up the paper. It was mostly blank. There were no ratings, no comments, no feedback. Just a signature line at the bottom. I asked what I was signing. He said it was standard procedure. He said it acknowledged that the review had taken place. I looked at the paper again. There was something printed in very small text at the bottom. I squinted to read it. It said, "I acknowledge that my performance will be continuously monitored and evaluated according to company standards." I asked what that meant. Richard said it meant the company would track my productivity going forward. He said it was normal. He slid a pen across the table. I signed it. I don't know why I signed it. I just did. Richard smiled wider. He said thank you. He said I could go back to work. I left the conference room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the form. I kept thinking about the phrase, continuously monitored. I checked my work computer the next Monday. There was new software installed, an icon I didn't recognize. When I clicked on it, a window opened showing real-time metrics, keystrokes per minute, mouse movements, active window tracking, time spent on each application. I closed the window. I asked my coworker Emily if she had the same software. She said yes. She said everyone got it after their 6-month review. She said you get used to it. I asked if it bothered her. She said no, but her hands were shaking when she said it. The monitoring got worse. A week later, I noticed a small camera installed in the corner of my cubicle. I asked IT about it. They said it was part of the new security system. I asked why it was pointed at my desk instead of the hallway. They didn't answer. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Richard. It said my productivity had dropped by 4% in the last 7 days. It said I needed to improve immediately. It included a detailed breakdown of every minute I'd spent away from my desk, bathroom breaks, coffee breaks, time spent talking to coworkers. I hadn't realized anyone was tracking that. I started working through lunch. I stopped taking breaks. I stayed late every night. My productivity score went up to 97%. I got another email from Richard. It said, "Excellent work." It said, "Keep it up." 3 weeks later, Emily stopped coming to work. Her cubicle was empty one Monday morning. I asked Vanessa what happened. She said Emily no longer worked there. I asked why. She said it wasn't appropriate to discuss. I checked the company directory. Emily's name was gone. I searched for her on social media. Her accounts were deleted. I called her cell phone. The number was disconnected. That same week, I noticed something strange about the other employees. They all moved the same way. Same posture. Same walking speed. Same gestures when they talked. They all smiled the same smile. During meetings, they all nodded at exactly the same time. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But then I watched them during a presentation. Richard was talking about quarterly goals. Everyone nodded, in perfect unison, like they'd been synchronized. I didn't nod. Richard looked directly at me. He didn't say anything. He just looked. That night, I got another email. It said my engagement score had dropped. It said I needed to participate more actively in company activities. It included a video file attachment. I opened it. It was footage from the meeting. It showed me sitting at the table. It showed everyone else nodding. It showed me not nodding. The video looped over and over. Me sitting still while everyone around me moved in sync. I deleted the email. The next day, I was called to conference room C again. Richard was waiting. He said we needed to talk about my performance. I said I'd been hitting all my targets. He said performance wasn't just about numbers. He said it was about alignment. I asked what that meant. He stood up. He walked to my side of the table. He put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was too tight. He said the company invested a lot in its employees. He said they expected loyalty in return. He said some people struggled with that concept. He said Emily had struggled. I asked what happened to Emily. He smiled. He said she was reassigned. I asked where. He didn't answer. He just squeezed my shoulder harder. He said I should go back to work. I left the conference room. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I was shaking. I pulled out my phone to call someone. Anyone. But my phone wouldn't turn on. I tried the power button. Nothing. I checked the battery. It was full, but the screen stayed black. I went back to my desk. My computer was on, but I hadn't left it on. There was a document open on the screen. It was a performance report about me. It listed everything I'd done that day, everything I'd said, everyone I'd talked to. It listed my bathroom break. It listed the fact that I'd tried to use my phone. It listed the exact time I'd spent in the stall. At the bottom, there was a note. Requires additional oversight. I looked up. Richard was standing in the hallway, watching me through the glass wall of my cubicle. He waved. I don't know how to get out. I've tried quitting. I wrote my resignation letter 3 times. Every time I try to submit it, my computer freezes. I've tried not showing up, but every morning I wake up and I'm here, at my desk, logged in, working. I don't remember driving here. I don't remember walking through the door. My productivity score is 99% now. Richard says I'm doing great. He says I'm finally aligned. I don't remember what I used to think about. I don't remember what I wanted to do with my life. I just know that I need to keep working because the company is watching, and if I stop, I'll end up like Emily, reassigned. This is Dread Dynasty, where nightmares come to life. Thank you for watching tonight's stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the next nightmare is closer than you think. Check the channel for more interesting nightmare.